2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by DodgerBlue.com's Matthew Moreno. Matt, 11 days away from opening day. Are we getting excited?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's, the start of spring training, it's exciting because that means, baseball's back, and then you get maybe like 10 days into spring training, and it's like, oh man, like this is getting a little mundane. Unless you're, Scott and Blake, who are loving the WBC, and I know we'll touch on that later tonight, but now you kind of see, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. And we're about to get into the days when starting lineups maybe last a little bit further into games. We saw Dustin May throw today. If you're listening to this live, joining us live, we appreciate it. But on Sunday, if you're listening to this on the podcast or watching this on YouTube the day after, he had permission to get up to 75 pitches. So we're getting to that phase where starters are going 4, 5, 6 innings, position players staying in the games longer. So those spring training games should be a little bit more enjoyable, less kind of no-name guys coming in out of the bullpen to try and put out fires. Again, thank you to the folks joining us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're going to take some live question and answers. We do this on Sunday nights. For the foreseeable future, it's going to be the 9 p.m. slot. Unfortunately, with some scheduling stuff, it's got to be a little later, but every Sunday night at 9 p.m., Matt and I will be here talking Dodgers, breaking down kind of the stuff that has just happened, looking ahead to the week ahead. So if you're not joining us live tonight, we would love to have you in the future. And if not, it'll be available, like we said, as part of the DodgerHeads podcast on Google, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get that, or on the Dodger Blue 1958 YouTube channel. So planned for tonight, huge show planned. I'm really excited as we get into this. We're going to bring back a couple old segments that we haven't used in a little while. We're going to do stock up and stock down. That's where Matt and I will each pick 3 guys from the spring that have either improved their stock or hurt their stock in our eyes. So about 6 guys mentioned there. I'll throw a couple honorable mentions in as well. Then we're going to do buying or selling with some spring storylines. We're going to talk Chris Taylor. We'll talk World Baseball Classic. We'll talk the new rule changes and whether or not our good friend Matt over here enjoys things like the pitch clock. Then we'll get into kind of the meat of the show, which is the 40-man roster predictions. As I said, 11 days away. They've optioned some guys to minor league camp. We have some clarity, primarily on the hitting side. There's kind of 4 guys competing for 3 spots, but the pitching side, a whole host of questions. We'll get into that. And then finally, we will celebrate the man whose birthday it is today as we record this, Clayton Kershaw. That will be how we close our show before we get to some questions. But Matt, let's start with stock up and stock down. We're looking at guys on the Dodgers within the organization who have either helped their case or hurt their case this spring. I'll let you start wherever you would want. Who's the first person that comes to mind for you in stock up and stock down?
I'm going to go stock up because I like to keep things positive and optimistic on our show. And I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm combining 2 guys, but it's under kind of one umbrella and central theme. And it's the defense that Jason Hayward has played in center field and the defense that Miguel Vargas has played at second base. In both those cases, I've honestly been impressed by both of them. And, with Hayward, I meant to look it up before we got on here. The last time he played center field, I think was like 2 or 3 years ago. And I just, considering where things had kind of gone with his career, like I was really doubtful, I guess you could say, of his ability to play center field. But he's made some nice plays out there. And more than anything, he hasn't looked incompetent. And so as long as he can, kind of man the position, because I know we'll get into opening day roster predictions down the line, but spoiler alert, Jason Hayward is going to be on mine.
Yeah.
So if he could play center field, like that's huge for the Dodgers, just in terms of versatility, especially with Chris Taylor needing to move into the infield now because of Gavin Lux's injury. And, Miguel Vargas, kind of the same thing. Obviously, it's kind of ironic that the sort of knock on him was that there wasn't really a position that the Dodgers felt comfortable with him at. And honestly, I think he's looked really strong at second base. And outside of like the first, I think, game or 2 that he played, which it's a new position for him, like there was a ball that maybe he should have made a play on. Since then, I feel like that you haven't really said that. And it's been more of, hey, Miguel Vargas, like he's kind of looking like a natural, making it seem easy out there.
Yeah, I'll start with Hayward. It is easy to let how bad he has been offensively skew the way I thought about him defensively. He was always a guy who was strong defensively. But, you're also thinking, okay, this is a guy who's getting sort of up there in age, in baseball terms. And it's one of those, it's like the Clayton Kershaw thing. Like you remember that, in Jason Hayward's case, he's not even 34 years old. He feels a lot older than that just because he's been in our lives for so long. But to your point, he did play a little bit of center field last year, just 23 games though. Primarily a right fielder throughout his career. That's been his primary position basically every year. And so, yeah, to your point, the Dodgers gave up a center fielder in Cody Bellinger who couldn't hit, but was among the best, if not the best defensively. And I'm with you. I mean, we're going to get to some of the outfielders. I think the Dodgers defensively, again, another topic we'll get to, are very strong in the outfield. I think Outman, I think Hayward, I think even Trace Thompson are all guys that are very good. But I think Vargas, who you mentioned, is the interesting one. There were a lot of doubts and a lot of skepticism about could he play second base with the new shift rules. Obviously, second base becomes a more difficult position. You've got way more ground to cover, especially next to first base, which is probably like the least mobile position of the bunch. And so that puts a lot of pressure on Vargas. But I'm with you. I've been impressed. I'm curious, Matt, when you look at Vargas, the second baseman, are you hoping he's league average? Do you think he could be better than league average? Kind of, or is it just, hey, the bar was so low and he has exceeded that?
Yeah, my expectations were pretty low just because of everything that I'd heard. Like I said, there was always, there was talk of, he got some work at third base while the Dodgers don't really see him as a third baseman. Let's try him in left field last season. And so because of that, I was concerned with how this experiment, if you want to call it, or transition was going to go. I think the reasonable expectation is for him to be league average, but I think he's going to exceed that. I think the level of play that he's been at is already better than league average. And so now if he can just maintain that over the course of a full season, then he'll finish as a very good second baseman defensively. And obviously the bat will kind of speak for itself. Yeah,
the bat is what's going to carry him if he can give you average defense. And I mean, look, Gavin Lux has had his doubters at second base. Max Muncy has had his doubters at second base. And so in a lot of these positions, we're not exactly comparing them to Gold Glove types. It's, can you just be competent enough out there? And I'm with you on Vargas. I think he'll get there, especially as time goes on. Stock up for me, I'll go first. I'm going to go Ryan Pepiot here as a stock up guy. We know this is a pitching prospect who's been a top 100 guy towards the back end, maybe off of some lists. He comes up, makes his major league debut last season, but struggles with control. 36 innings pitched, 27 walks. And so coming into this spring, and look, we're going to say it a lot, we're not overreacting to any spring training stats here, but I think the theme for me with spring training is, if I have a concern about you, I do think spring training is an opportunity for you to prove that you can put that concern to bed. It's not to say that everything is fixed, but
is there some foreshadowing there?
Yes. Yes. Warning, Chris Taylor. But like with a guy like Pepiot, if you're still walking people in spring training and walks are a problem for you, then it's not like, oh, this doesn't matter, we'll just see what happens. I'm not saying because he has solved his walk problem, which I'll get to in a second, his walk problem, that, oh, he's going to be perfectly fine now. But it's encouraging if you can do better. And so in 4 starts, just 9 innings pitched, just 3 walks. So 3 walks and 9 innings pitched. That might not sound awesome to you. Again, he was walking like 6 guys per 9. Last year, he's now at 3 per 9. That's much better. Small sample size, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But 9 innings, 13 strikeouts, just 2 earned runs for Ryan Pepiot, a guy with prospect pedigree and a guy who has pitched well. We're going to get to, is he the number 5 starter a little bit later? But I've been impressed with Pepiot. It feels like he's not going to be an ace. He's not going to be your number 1, but it feels like he's developing into the guy that they hoped it would. And oh, by the way, when we interviewed him, he did say he has a much better feel for his changeup this year than he did last year, which I think helps.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with all that. And, I remember one of our off-season shows, I don't think spring training had started yet. Somebody might've been asking us, about Pepiot. And I said, I think honestly, Michael Grove might be who they call up first when they need a spot starter. And Grove has also pitched well during spring training, but to Pepiot's credit, he's been I think that much better. At least when you look at, kind of where he finished last season to what you're seeing now, the improvement is there. And, it is a little hard to gauge because it's only spring training, and it's, one of those starts is like a 1 inning start and then, a 2 inning start. So it's a little choppy, but more than anything, he's just in the zone a lot more now. And if he's not in the zone, then he's, kind of his misses aren't completely out of the strike zone where it's just a non-competitive pitch and you're not going to get anybody to swing at it. And so I've been impressed, Frank. I can't say enough about Pepiot and about Grove as well. And I know we'll possibly get to it at some point. But, yeah, I think, Pepio has made strides definitely in the right direction, and he's trending, upward. And of course, I mean, I guess there doesn't seem to be any concern with kind of the side discomfort that forced him to come out of his last start. But I mean, that could be something, if he throws a bullpen session that acts up, then it could be something to keep an eye on. But for now, everything seems great.
Yeah, I would say this about Pepio and Grove. I think both guys have been really good. I think Pepio had a head start on Grove just because of the prospect pedigree and whatnot. And so I think that's where those two are at. So I've got Pepio as my first stock up. Who you got in second on your list?
I'm going to do another stock up, and I'm going to go with Freddie Freeman. And really, I mean, I know it's might be kind of tough to sell this one because it's Freddie Freeman, right? It kind of speaks for itself. But I think honestly, before he left the WBC and then when he came back right away, he picked up right where he left off. Like, he's just consistent. And I think it's even more key this season because, like you guys have talked about on some of the other live shows with Jeff and Scott, with Blake and Scott, the Dodgers' margin for error this season it's not quite as big as it's been. And so you're going to need Freddie Freeman to basically be, kind of a superstar. You're going to need Mookie Betts to be a superstar. And so I think that the fact that Freddie Freeman, I'm laughing at one of the comments. Sorry. The fact that I'll let you throw it up once I'm done. The fact that Freddie Freeman is kind of, meeting expectations, if you will, if not exceeding them, I think is a great sign for the Dodgers.
Yeah, the comment was, I thought Matt was going to say stock up because Freddie left the World Baseball Classic. I mean, I will say there was a hamstring concern at one point. So the fact that he's healthy, he's back in games, I think that matters. But to your point, the margin for error is smaller. And so for a guy like Mookie and a guy like Freddie, you've got to be hitting. We can't have 3 weeks to get you warmed up for the season. So kudos to Freddie for playing at a high level already. And yeah, it is nice to have him back in Dodgers camp as well. Second on my list will be the least surprising thing in the history of the world. If you have been listening to me at all for the past month and really probably 12 months, James Outman is going to be my second stock up. I know he's been struggling of late. Every Dodger that is competing for the final roster spot has been really, really bad for the last 4 or 5 days. And yet 35 at bats, 895 OPS, a pair of home runs. And to me, it's just, it's the look. He looks the part. He looks like he belongs. Even today, there was kind of a funny moment where he comes up with the bases loaded and nobody out. I wasn't totally dialed in. I'm not sure what happened, but he got an automatic strike right off the bat. So he's down in an 0-1 count to start. And the second pitch, I mean, he absolutely torches a ball that was foul by about 3 feet. And that's the thing with Outman. Everything he hits is freaking on a rope. I mean, we don't get exit velocities in spring training, but everything it feels like is hit hard. His line outs, his deep fly balls, it all feels hard. So yes, the numbers are there. The eye test is there. We talked about before, plus defense in the outfield, wherever he plays. Does he have a spot on the roster? We'll get to that. But I don't know how Outman could have really helped his stock any more than he already has. A 900 OPS, huge exit velocities, and plus on defense. So Outman to me is my second stock up.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. He looks ready. And if, he was on the opening day roster, nobody would bat an eye, obviously. I just, I'll table my comments for later. Before I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'll leave it at that's an understandable stock up for you.
There you go. So stock down. We each picked one person that we were going to go stock down on. And yours should get a couple people a little riled up, but I'll let you explain yourself. Go for it.
Yeah. So my stock down is Diego Cartaya, and it's more of just I thought with the WBC happening and once Will Smith and Austin Barnes left camp, Dave Roberts said that Cartaya was going to receive more opportunities to play in games. I think what's been disappointing for me is that he hasn't started, and I feel like with his prospect pedigree at this point, with where he is in the system, like he should be starting these games with the Dodgers. And so, Dave Roberts, when we were out there and he was asked about Cartaya's kind of receiving skills and kind of development in that area, and he said he was very diplomatic in his, I guess, criticism or critique, if you will. And he said, some of it is, one evaluator could say he's a great receiver and another could say, well, he's not. And he's, there's some truth kind of in the middle. And he said it's something the Dodgers are working on with Cartaya along with everything else. And Dave Roberts did say that Cartaya does have, the right mindset and work ethic to get better. But I've just been a little disappointed that, he hasn't, I feel, and I'm not saying that it's absolutely correct, but I think that with Will Smith and Austin Barnes gone, Cartaya should have been in a position where the Dodgers are saying, yeah, it makes sense to have him starting the majority of these games, not still coming in off the bench after like Patrick Mazeika or Hunter Fiducia.
Yeah, and I think he's in a tough spot too because of the prospect rankings. This is a guy that Keith Law has said could be a potential number 1 overall prospect in baseball down the line. He's in the top, 15, 25 on some lists. When he comes into camp, you kind of want him to make his presence known, even if you acknowledge, hey, he hasn't been above high A and, that kind of thing. And yet it just hasn't. Like, he hasn't made an impact. He hasn't been in games a ton. And so is that because he needs development? Is that because of the Dodgers and the way that they're playing it? It's hard to say, but I understand where you're coming from. You'd like for it to be like, holy crap, did you see what Diego Cartaya did last week? And we just haven't had any of those moments yet, unfortunately. And we're going to have to wait another year because he's just a guy that, him and some of these other people, hey, I'll see you in 12 months when spring training rolls around next year. For those of us that don't get a chance to follow some of the lower level minor league teams throughout the season. I see a lot of people asking about Chris Taylor in the stock down. We're going to get to Chris Taylor in a moment. That's why he wasn't either of our stock downs. I'm going to go a slightly different direction, but in the outfield. And I'm going to go Trace Thompson as my stock down. I don't feel like this is a person that a lot of people have talked about. Obviously was gone at the World Baseball Classic, but it has been a very rough spring for Trace Thompson, which is important for this reason. He was incredible last year. I was the guy that was arguing all throughout the end of the season into the postseason. This guy needs to be starting. He's better than Bellinger. He's better than Taylor, on and on and on. He was great, but we were also acknowledging it was a total outlier year. Now, we've seen guys like Max Muncy and Justin Turner turn it around. So it's not to say an outlier can't become the norm, but with Trace Thompson, it was very clearly an outlier. And so again, I was curious coming into camp, which Trace Thompson were we going to see? Was this a guy who was going to continue tearing the cover off the ball, or was he going to go back to the guy who was on 3 teams in 3 organizations last year and who hadn't played a ton in the major league level for a couple of years? The answer, unfortunately, so far has been the latter. 2 for 21 in spring training with 9 strikeouts and 6 walks, 3 for 14 at the World Baseball Classic with 7 strikeouts. And that's the part that concerns me. 3 for 14 at the WBC with 7 strikeouts. That's against, in some cases, higher level pitching, maybe more representative of major league pitching, sort of regular season pitching. But for him to get 5 hits and 35 at bats and strike out 16 times for a guy that I still think has to prove himself as belonging in the outfield and belonging at the major league level, I'm concerned. I have less confidence now. Again, I'm not overreacting to spring training, but there are certain guys like Mookie Betts could do whatever he wants in spring training. I wouldn't care. Clayton Kershaw, Julio Urias, I do not care. Guys who have not proven consistently at the major league level or have given me reason to have serious doubt, like a Trace Thompson, like a Chris Taylor, who we're going to get to in a moment. Those are the guys that I think I'm paying closer attention to. And Trace Thompson has not looked good from the perspective of what I've seen.
Yeah, Trace is he's an interesting case because on one hand, like you said, he's kind of flying under the radar. I think just because it's obviously basically a given that he's going to be on the opening day roster and playing, some sort of key role, whether it's platoon in left field or center field, whatever the case may be. In terms of, I wonder if part of me wonders, maybe was he pressing a little bit early into spring because, the focus for those guys was, hey, I need to play a little bit more regularly than normal because I'm leaving to the WBC.
Yeah.
And then when he joined Great Britain, he hit the home run against Team USA. And I think he had a double too, either in that game or another World Baseball Classic. We need our experts
yeah, exactly.
on here. But I remember that he was hitting well and everything. Okay, that's good. But then he did, you rattled off whatever his, I forgot he was 3 for 17? Is that what you said?
3 for 14 at the World Baseball Classic with 7 strikeouts.
3 for 14. And I'm pretty sure he ended with a string of 6 strikeouts in a row or something. It got, an unfortunate stretch for him. And so there's some concern there. And I think there is stock down. I guess, the good thing for Trace is there's not going to be any shortage of opportunities. Although, if David Peralta, he tore the cover off the ball for Venezuela. And so if he comes back and can prove that he can also hit lefties, then, he'll end up taking, I think, what was thought to be a platoon won't necessarily end up being that.
Yeah. And I should clarify, I believe after today, Trace Thompson might be 2 for 23 in the spring, because I believe the numbers I was looking at were before today's game. So we'll see how it shakes out. Again, we're not making roster decisions based on spring training. It's just, oh man, you were hoping to see Trace Thompson continue the momentum. Haven't seen that. A couple honorable mentions. Gavin Stone, I think, deserves to get mentioned here. 6 innings, 14 strikeouts, 0 runs allowed for the Dodgers. number 2 pitching prospect, according to most places. Excuse me. I think according to all places, he's number 2, but he had 8 strikeouts in 3 innings today. Obviously, towards the end of games, pitching against the back end of rosters, not necessarily starting games like Pepio and Grove have been, but hard not to be impressed with Gavin Stone. And then Jimmy Nelson, unfortunately, a stock down. I'd have to go find the stat. I think he has walked like 11 of 21 batters that he has faced this spring. We were at a game. The velocity was way down. He only threw to like 3 guys and then came out. It was raining. We weren't entirely sure why he was pitching in that game a couple of weeks ago. But man, Jimmy Nelson, if you told me he woke up tomorrow and announced his retirement, I, unfortunately for him, would not be surprised. So Stone, stock up. Still don't think he makes an impact at the major league level to begin the season. Nelson, stock down for me.
Yeah, and I think, just to kind of really quick to piggyback off your Gavin Stone, his interview on Sportsnet LA, he was talking about kind of, just pitching with confidence. And he said, quote, "If you don't exude confidence, then hitters are going to have better at-bats. That's my main focus, is to stay as confident as possible on the mound, because if I throw my stuff, I know my stuff is better than their stuff." So, I mean, hey, he's walking the walk and talking the talk.
That's like the Miguel Vargas quote where it's like, no, I can take the strike, coach, because don't worry, he has nothing that he can strike me out with. You need that to succeed at the major league level. And for a guy like Stone, again, I don't think either of us have him in the opening day roster rotation. And I think, by the way, the Dodgers are telling us that because he hasn't started any games. Now, we're not at the end of spring. Like Bobby Miller started a game against the Angels in the Freeway Series. Could Gavin Stone find himself in that type of situation? We'll see. But I don't think he's earned himself opening day roster consideration. But again, I'll wait to hear your opinion on that until we get later in the show. All right, let's move into another segment here. And this is going to be buying or selling, Matt. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make a statement and you tell me, are you buying it? AKA, do you agree with this? Or are you selling it? Meaning, no, I want nothing to do with that take. I completely disagree. And we'll get to the one right off the bat that I think a lot of people are hoping we talk about quickly based on the segment we just got to. Are you buying or selling that Chris Taylor is in real trouble? Chris Taylor this spring is 5 for 37 with 1 extra base hit and 16 strikeouts. He has a 472 on base plus slugging percentage this year. Again, as I said, who cares about spring training on one hand? And yet, if it's confirming all of the fears and all of the issues that he had last year while he was injured and before he fixed his swing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, do you believe that Chris Taylor is in serious trouble?
I think he is. And, more than just kind of the spring training stats. I mean, on one hand, like that is an extension of kind of what we saw last year when Chris Taylor struggled. Is my bigger concern is, and I mean, he might have done an interview a little bit more recently where he said there's been some progress, but basically like both Dave Roberts and Chris Taylor have said like his swing just doesn't feel right now and is kind of, a work in progress. And that is what spring training is for, right? Like you iron stuff out, but it's just a little like we're pretty deep into spring training. I mean, this is the final week of, exhibition games before the regular season starts. And so to hear that Chris Taylor is still sort of searching for it, I think there is reason to be concerned when you then couple it with what we saw last year.
Yeah. Last year, 677 OPS, 160 strikeouts in 400 at-bats. I mean, just do the math on that. He struck out in almost 40% of his at-bats last season. You look at the StatCast, it wasn't great. He was in the 1st percentile for whiff rate, the 1st percentile for strikeout rate, the 2nd percentile for expected batting average, and the 20th percentile for average exit velocity. 1s and 2s in that category are not good. That means you're worst in the league. Chris Taylor was among them. And you watch him, and it's like sometimes the eye test is difficult to sort of explain, because with Chris Taylor, it feels like there's a hole in his bat. He's just swinging through pitches that were right in the zone. And again, I know it's spring training. I know these games don't matter. I know it's meaningless. And yet I don't think he's trying to strike out 16 times in 37 at bats. Half of those probably against guys who won't even be in the major leagues by the time the season starts. And so I'm buying this. I think Taylor is going to get a chance. Don't get me wrong. He's definitely a lock to be on the opening day roster. Again, we're going to get to that segment, but man, like if 3 months into the season, it's more of the same from Chris Taylor, I think he could be in a role where he's the utility guy who barely plays and who's kind of the last guy off the bench, the role that maybe Yanni Hernandez could be filling, could become the Chris Taylor role. He obviously has owed a lot of money over the next few years, which he deserves to be getting paid based on how he has performed in the past. But I have some real questions for Chris Taylor. And I hope he gets chances in the spring. I see Michael here says Chris needs to be in the top 3 at bat in these last few games. I'd like that. Let's get him some more ABs in games that don't matter so he can try and work through some of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think another thing too is I'm pretty sure Tim Neverett, which happy birthday to Tim also, he brought it up on the broadcast either a day or two ago that Chris Taylor, I think he was referencing last season, his chase rate was way down. So he is like at least staying in the strike zone. So on one hand, like that's good, right? Because he's not just flailing at a bunch of pitches. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, like it's, a fastball down the middle type thing. Like you're missing, like what is going on that you just can't hit the pitches in the zone. So that, of course, is, is a glass half full, half empty. But yeah, I think there's definitely some concern.
Yeah, 71st percentile in walk rate, 83rd percentile in chase rate. So one of the best guys at not chasing, and yet the worst guy in the league at swinging and missing. So, I mean, like, you would rather a guy have a terrible chase rate and a terrible whiff rate because you're like, oh, well, maybe he's just swinging at pitches outside of the zone. Chris Taylor is swinging and missing at pitches in the strike zone. That is incredibly, incredibly concerning. All right, number 2 on our buying and selling list. Matt, probably the most controversial when it comes to you. Buying or selling the new rules as awesome. Pitch clock, bigger bases, shift. We went over this in our last show. Game times are down. Hits are up. Runs are up. Ground balls for singles are up. Everything is positive unless you're Matt Moreno. I have a feeling here.
Can I push on this one? I mean, like new rules are okay. Can I do that? Like it's the awesome. If we're sticking to awesome, then I'm going to have to sell that. If it's new rules are passable, then I'll buy that. So basically at the end of the day, I'll push like we've discussed both, kind of in person, we were hanging out in spring training, and I think I brought it up on this show. Like my pushback is reducing game time by 20 to 25. Like, is that going to make a big enough impact for the sport? Like that's what I'm skeptical about. And I think that baseball, the larger bases, I'm fine with those. That's not that big of a deal. I honestly am curious if there's more. Is it, teams see like, oh, there's bigger bases so we can run now because, there's less ground to cover. Like, is it more of a mental thing?
Yeah.
Or are teams just maybe being more aggressive because of, the limited pickoff throws, which that rule I completely have an issue with because I think that changes the fabric of the game entirely too much. Because if a pitcher does it twice, like I've brought it up before, I'm sure some of these people have heard me. I'm going to sound like a broken record. 99% they're not coming over there a third time because it's too huge of a risk. And so that changes the game fundamentally too much for my liking. Yeah. And, again, like I think, can we get Major League Baseball to maybe use one baseball that isn't being messed with or they're not experimenting secret? Like, can we do that stuff first and see if that kind of helps? Like, I'm just pushing back on, hey, we're going to trim games by 20 minutes and popularity is going to go through the roof. Like, I'm not buying that yet.
It's amazing that, like, to me, game times down, hits up, runs up. These are like good.
That's fine. Like I said,
stolen
it's more
bases
just,
up.
It's
Good.
It's more just like I don't know if the games being 20 minutes shorter is going to all of a sudden make baseball popularity skyrocket. That's
but
what
I'm gonna like it more. You're gonna like it more. Like a 2.5 hour game is a great thing.
I mean,
I think I don't think it hurts you in the popularity thing, but even for fans that are already there, like the fact that a Dodger game on a weeknight isn't going to be ending at 10:20 p.m., but instead is going to be ending at 9:45 p.m. Like that to me is a massive win just in and of itself. I don't think the bases, you'll notice the shift, like I could have done either way with. I like the fact that when a ball is hit off the bat, you have like an 80% success rate in figuring out if it's going to be a hit or not before they cut to the second camera. But again, to me, I just looking at the small sample size, if you're telling me in the regular season that games are going to be 26 minutes shorter, that runs are going to be up, that hits are going to be up, it's kind of like we could sit and argue about the rules and whatnot. And again, I'm not like hey, you're stupid if you disagree with me on this take. I'm just saying, like, if somebody came up to you, Matt, and said, hey, Matt, I would like to do, I could do something where games are shorter, there's more hits, there's more runs, and it's still baseball. I don't know. Like, to me, that feels like an easy sell.
That's fair. I guess I just think that the new rules in general, some of them a little bit more than the others. There's just a lot of nuance to them. And honestly, like, look, if baseball wants to improve popularity in a flash, do what the WBC is and let fans bring in a bunch of instruments and stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
like I know that like you and I have kind of joked about the WBC and all that, but for the most part, like it's popular. Like everybody is saying, I mean, the numbers, like MLB just put out a bunch of numbers on viewership and attendance, like it's through the roof. And so if you want the regular season to be more fun, like why not do that as well? Now, that's not something I would enjoy, but I'll table that conversation for another day.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, we'll move on from this one. Next one. Buying or selling that the Dodgers defense in 2023 will be better than the Dodgers defense in 2022. Now, as I was writing this one, at first I wrote it and then I was like, nah, I don't know. Because I was looking and saying, well, Cody Bellinger, who is arguably the best defensive player on the team, either him or Mookie Betts, is no longer there. And there's kind of an unknown as to who he's going to fill. But as I went through it, you've downgraded in center field. Although, as we talked about with Hayward and with Outman and even with Thompson, it's you're probably getting 85% of the defense from Cody Bellinger between those guys, while at the same time, you've got a huge upgrade defensively at shortstop. Now, we're talking defense only here, okay? Not offense. Defense, huge upgrade at shortstop. Probably a push at second base, Vargas to Lux. Probably a push in left field. The Dodgers have never been incredibly strong defensively in left field. Peralta will be fine. And maybe an upgrade. I think Muncy at this point in his career is probably a better defensive third baseman than Justin Turner. I know you're probably going to push back against that one, but I just look at the whole, the upgrade at short compared to the downgrade at center and maybe pushes or small upgrades elsewhere. I hadn't thought about it until today, but I actually think the Dodgers will be better defensively this year than they have been in years past. Buying or selling?
Yeah, I'm buying that. And I think, if we want to individually break down, for me, I think Vargas has the potential to be a better second baseman than Gavin Lux, at least maybe more consistently. Because, with Lux, sometimes like even from second base, like he'd get ready to go make a throw and you're kind of holding your breath every now and then. I've expressed on this show several times, like with Muncy, like I never really understood the Muncy over Justin Turner at third base. My eyes tell me that Justin Turner was a better third baseman and that Muncy was good at second base. And so like I've expressed before when, I was confused last season when, heading into the year, months before they even signed Freeman, he said, yeah, I'll gladly move to second base. It's my favorite position. I thought, okay, great. Like that really frees it up. Like there's not going to be any issue. And then Muncy is playing third base all year long and not second base. But anyway, I agree. Peralta, I think Peralta, similar to Hayward, will end up being better in the outfield than you and I are probably both expecting. Because I'm a little concerned about him too, just because he's in baseball terms an older player, and so you wonder about the range and foot speed and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, as a whole, I think the Dodgers defense, and obviously I glossed over probably the biggest defensive upgrade. No slight to Trey Turner because he's doing great for Team USA right now, but Miguel Rojas has always been kind of a defensive whiz at any position he's played, but particularly shortstop. And so the sum of everything, I think, will end up being better than it was last year.
Yeah, and Peralta, as folks in the chat are pointing out, graded well according to outs above average. He was in the 88th percentile last season. We'll see. I mean, again, I'm saying he's an upgrade over the AJ Pollock types that they have had out in left field in years past. Trace Thompson was obviously good out there, so he's probably in the same ballpark as Trace Thompson. And I'm saying that I think Trace Thompson is good, so that's not an insult to Peralta. But again, it just wasn't something I was thinking. Obviously, if Gavin Lux was at shortstop, this is a very different conversation, but he's not. Miguel Rojas is, and so the Dodgers defense, I would say, has improved. All right, number 4 here, buying or selling that this year you have more confidence in the pitching depth of the Dodgers as an organization. Last year, they came into the season with 6 quote unquote established starting pitchers. I don't think people knew what they had in Tyler Anderson. I think they were thinking he was a average starter that would start in the bullpen and be your 6th guy. Obviously, he turned out to be much better than that. This year, they don't have a clear-cut 6th starter, but with the emergence of guys like Ryan Pepio and Michael Grove and Andre Jackson and Gavin Stone, do you buy or sell the idea that the Dodgers pitching depth, their ability to replace injured pitchers, is better this year than it was last year?
This is tough because I think the upside is definitely there, but there's still the Dodgers, like I've said, they're not going to call up Bobby Miller in April and say, hey, go make 15 starts for us in a row. And so because of that, I'm going to sell it. I'm going to sell this for now with, like I said, the biggest caveat is the upside, the potential is absolutely there. But in terms of how it sort of unfolds, if the Dodgers really need to tap into that depth kind of early, which as unfortunately we've seen, like injuries happen at any moment, then I think it could get a little dicey.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously, again, last year they had a better number 6 guy. I think, like an Anderson, I should say, a more proven number 6. You knew what you were getting with Tyler Anderson, even if you didn't love it. Obviously, it turned out to be much better. You kind of felt like, hey, they have 6 and they'll figure it out. You had Mitch White again as probably that 7th guy, and then it was sort of the Pepio Grove kind of mix, but they were rookies and hadn't really proven anything. This year, you've got 5, and again, Syndergaard, what we get out of him as sort of, whatever number you want to put him in there. Obviously, Tony Gonsolin now to miss the beginning of the season. But I just feel way better about Ryan Pepio right now than I did a year ago. I feel way better about Michael Grove right now than I did a year ago. Maybe you could even make the argument that Andre Jackson, a guy who never even made it to the big leagues last year, you feel a little bit better that Dave Roberts is grouping him in there. You definitely feel better about Gavin Stone and Bobby Miller and Nick Nastrini, some of those guys and their ability. And so, while to your point, maybe you don't feel as good about number 6 and 7 right now. Although with Grove and Pepio, I feel pretty decent. Like, I think those guys can give you league average, major league starting performance tomorrow. I really believe that. And so this is why I'm buying that. I am more confident in the pitching depth now, even though they don't maybe have the 6th guy that, let me put it this way. Tyler Anderson had a higher floor than the number 6 starter of this year, but in many people's estimation, he had a lower ceiling. That was wrong. We were all wrong. Tyler Anderson, go Ducks. I don't know what the ceiling on Pepio is higher, but the floor is also lower. Like, he could come out and walk 6 guys every 9 and say, oh, he just had a nice spring, but this is who he's going to be. He's actually a reliever. Michael Grove is really like Mitch White 2.0. Like, we could find that out. But right now, I actually feel better, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think part of it too is, I should have mentioned it, with Grove, I think we hope that he can be a starter, but there's been some discussion of, does he make more sense in the bullpen because his stuff will kind of play up a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so that could end up changing, the calculus of the pitching depth, at least in the rotation. I mean, for me, like, and I don't know if we specified for this question if it was within the rotation.
Starting. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Rotation.
Yeah. Okay. Then, yeah. I mean, so if Grove ends up, being better in the bullpen, then, there's less depth that the Dodgers can kind of tap on that's experienced and that would be able to kind of take on maybe a larger workload this year if they need it.
Yeah. All right. Last one here. World Baseball Classic love. Buying or selling the idea that the World Baseball Classic has been good for the Dodgers as an organization, i.e., it has been good for Peralta and Betts and Smith and Thompson and all of the guys that are going, Austin Barnes, Julio Urias, the guys that are playing for their countries. Are you buying that this has been good for them as members of the Dodgers and will have a positive impact on the 2023 season for the Dodgers specifically? We're not making value judgments about the World Baseball Classic. All right, folks, this isn't about that. As a Dodgers fan, are you happy that the guys have gone through it who will be returning to Major League camp in the next 10 days?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. There's a little bit of I do subscribe to the kind of, iron sharpens iron theory a little bit. And these games, obviously, I guess, well, depending on who you listen to, they maybe mean more than spring training or they don't. I'll say that they do. And there's definitely more intensity. I mean, that comes across like, so sure, it's a good thing. Now, if I think a lot of this has to do with the players that are in it. If, Clayton Kershaw was there, like we talked about, it was unfortunate for him that he had to withdraw, and there was there was a huge upside from, you don't necessarily have to worry about the injury concern of, maybe pitching in a more competitive game than spring training is kind of early on. And so, but yeah, I mean, it's fine.
Yeah, I tend to think it's good for the Dodgers because you get the competitive juices flowing. You get probably a little bit more intensity in moments. And so it probably simulates some moments that the Dodgers are going to be in early in the season when a guy comes up with runners on second and third, 2 outs in the bottom of the 8th of a 1-run game or something like that. So as long as these guys come back healthy, then it will have been good for the Dodgers to have sent guys over there. That's my general thing. If I can restate my World Baseball Classic perspective, because I get crushed for this all of the times, I am not anti-World Baseball Classic. I am apathetic to the World Baseball Classic. I have lots of things going on in my life. That's not because I'm important. It's because life happens sometimes. And so if someone loves the World Baseball Classic, I'm very happy for them. I'm sure it's awesome. Like I see the videos, I see people tweeting about it. Great for you. I don't hate the World Baseball Classic. I just am in a moment in my life where I don't care about the World Baseball Classic. if the U.S. wins, I will be happier than if Cuba would have won. But alas, that is where I'm at. So if you think I'm anti-World Baseball Classic guy, I am not. I'm apathetic World Baseball Classic. And then, I just find it interesting, Matt, not to go on a slight tangent here. Apathy in 2023 is perceived as antagonism. Like, it's like if you say, I love this thing, and I say, I don't care about that thing, we live in a world where now it's perceived as like, you must hate this thing. I'm like, no, I just don't have the energy to care. I love F1. I'm guessing, Matt, you don't care at all about F1. I don't take offense to that. I was watching English Premier League soccer this morning. I'm guessing you don't care about English Premier League soccer. I take no offense to that. If I said, Matt, it's awesome, and you said I don't care, I would not be offended. So there you go. As Iray says, I don't care that you don't care. Good. Let's all move on with our lives then in that regard. Let's get on to the 40-man roster, because I think as we are 11 days out, and the next time you and I sit down in the long form, we will most likely have basically already announced who the opening day roster is. So let's talk about who's going to make the 26-man roster to start the season. Let's talk hitters first. I'm going to group people into locks and up for debate. On the locks side, I think we're going to have entire agreement here on these 10 players. Will Smith and Austin Barnes behind the plate. Freddie Freeman, Miguel Vargas, Miguel Rojas, Max Muncy, the infield. You've got Mookie Betts in right field, Peralta in left field, JD Martinez at DH, and Chris Taylor somewhere. I think those 10 are 100%, no doubt in anyone's mind, going to make the opening day roster. Any disagreement from you on those 10?
No disagreement, but should I mention who I would also include in that, or do you want me to hold off?
Go ahead. Yeah, if you've got another guy as a lock in there, if you want to throw, someone else, go for it.
Yeah, I think Jason Hayward's a lock. I think he was like pretty early on, just, Freddie Freeman pushed for him to be signed. And frankly, there wasn't very much competition in the outfield, especially once, like I said, Chris Taylor needed to be moved around. And Dave Roberts has come out and said basically, like, yeah, he's pretty much going to be on the roster. So all of that put together, I think we can make Jason Hayward a 99.9% lock.
Yeah, and the second category for me is kind of the toss-ups. It's Jason Hayward, it's James Outman, it's Trace Thompson, Yanni Hernandez, and I'll throw an other category if you want. Basically, the Dodgers have spots for 3 of these guys. I would say I agree with you. Hayward, if not a lock, it's like 98.5%. I would actually say Trace Thompson's in the same boat. They can't option him. They've kept him around for this long. They have options with James Outman. So I think Trace Thompson is the other guy who's the 98.5% lock. So for me, it then comes down to, is it James Outman for the last spot? Is it Yanni Hernandez for the last spot? Or are we going off the board here? And is there somebody else in the organization that you think maybe grabs that last spot? So I'll let you go first. I've got Hayward and I've got Thompson both in. I'm guessing you do as well. Who is the third and final guy out of Outman, Hernandez, or quote unquote other? And folks in the chat, throw yours in there as well. We'll throw some comments up, your prediction on who of this group are the final 3 players.
Yeah, so when I initially was putting this together, I had it boiled down to the competition for the final spot for me was between Yoni Hernandez and James Outman. Now, for a past few weeks, I even tweeted about it, I think from our website's account like 10 days ago or so, maybe a week ago, that everybody was going to be really upset once Outman got optioned to Oklahoma City for everyday at bats. I still think that that's probably the more likely outcome. But then when I was even looking at those 2, I started thinking, do the Dodgers try to go maybe a little more defensive minded with a Steven Duggar or a Bradley Zimmer? Now, on one hand, and one of the reasons for that I thought could be, like I said, it's, kind of more of a defensive approach, 1. And 2, if and when you need those guys to come off the 40-man roster, it's a little bit easier to DFA somebody like that than to figure out like, oh man, okay, we're not cutting Outman, maybe not necessarily cutting Yoni Hernandez, although he potentially could fall into that category as well if he struggles. But yeah, I mean, I'm all over the place. I'm the least confident in it being Outman just because I think they're going to value him getting everyday at bats at OKC, and I'm not convinced that those will come with the Dodgers because I think they like what they've seen from Jason Hayward.
Yeah, I agree with, I think everything is in play. We agree on Hayward and Thompson. I think Outman, if you say, hey, look at the spring this guy has put out there, I think there's a compelling case to be made that he's the 3rd best outfielder that the Dodgers have. as I've said before, when we kind of honed in on last show, the margins are slim. This isn't a team that can just sort of dick around for the first week or two or month or two of the season and figure it out. The margin in the division, if the Dodgers are going to be in it, is not going to be big. And so why would you not put your best 3 outfielders out there to begin with? Now, you could make the case, hey, that doesn't give them enough infield depth. I would argue that with Chris Taylor and his ability to play shortstop, to play third base, Mookie Betts' ability to play second base, you could kind of figure out first base. Miguel Vargas can move around a little bit. Miguel Rojas can move around a little bit. I would argue with all those things that you would have enough coverage. And so to me, if I were putting the best roster out there, it would be Outman starting in center field, Mookie in right, Peralta in left, and then you've got Hayward and Thompson as the 2 guys off the bench. That's how I would do it. Do they actually do that? I don't know. Yanni Hernandez has cooled off. He was making a really strong push at one point, and it's like, well, he's hitting the ball and he can play all these positions and he can run the whole thing. Now he's not hitting quite as much. So I think I've cooled on that one. So I just keep coming back to, I know the rumors are that Outman's not going to make it. I know sort of that, well, they don't want to let him ride the bench. I agree. They need left-handed bats. Outman is their third best outfielder. He's also a lefty. I just keep coming back to, I think they carry the extra outfielder. They let Chris Taylor figure it out as the utility infielder and go from there. So I've got Hayward, Outman, and Thompson. Where did you land the plane? Did you land the plane on your prediction?
I didn't land it.
No,
I was circling.
On the fence, Moreno over here.
Let me see.
You can't push on this one, Matt. You got to pick one.
I'll go Yanni Hernandez, even though, okay. He's like you said, he started to cool off, and I'll just throw this out, and it's absolutely true. Like, you guys don't have to check this. He started cooling off the minute Blake started talking about him.
I love it.
So we can blame Blake for that, and we'll ask Blake to stop talking about him so that Yoni will start hitting again.
There you go. All right, let's move. So you've got Hayward, Thompson, and Hernandez. Yeah. I've got Hayward, Thompson, and Outman. We'll see who's right. No, and I didn't see anybody take the other. You mentioned Duggar and Bradley Zimmer. Yeah. Is it one of those guys is having a nice spring offensively?
I think it's they're so interchangeable. Whichever one, I think it's Duggar. He played against he went off against the Giants, or maybe it's Zim. I don't know.
Okay. Well, one of those guys, I remember looking and being like, man, okay, I see what's going on here. Let's see. Oh, this isn't gonna. Gosh, dang it! This is like the worst content in the world here. Zimmer. Oh, no. Well, yeah. Okay. Zimmer's got an 827 OPS. Duggar's got 762. So Zimmer's hitting 292, 24 at bats, a couple doubles. But I just don't think they're going to need the defense, because I think all the guys we mentioned can play some defense. So there you go. Let's go to the pitching side then. Let's start with the pitching locks. I think this is where there might be a little bit more like who's a lock and who's not a lock. But locks for me, 100%, obviously on the roster. Kershaw, Urias, May, Syndergaard, and then I've got 3 relievers as the only 3 guys who are locks. That's Evan Phillips, Yency Almonte, and Alex Vesia. So I've got 7 guys as locks, 4 starters and 3 relievers. Anybody you would add to that list as a lock? I've got 3 guys that are kind of safe bets category. So I've got 7 locks, 3 guys in the safe bets category, and then it's all hell breaks loose from there.
Yeah, I definitely have more locks than you.
Okay.
I think you didn't mention Ferguson, right?
Correct.
So he's a lock for me, and I don't think you mentioned Gratterall.
Those guys are both on my safe bets. So if you want to, I'm splitting hairs.
We can elevate that.
Okay. So do you have those 9? Because Shelby Miller is the other guy on my safe bets category. Do you have him as a lock?
I have him as a lock as well.
Okay. So we've got 10 guys kind of in the same boat. Is there anybody else you would add to that category right now?
I don't think so. Did you mention Pepio?
So we're going to get to that. So I don't have, I think the 5th starter spot is not a lock, because you could tell me it's Grove and they don't carry a 6th starter. You could tell me it's Andre Jackson. You could tell me it's Pepio. Like, I think there's enough permutations of how they handle that I wouldn't qualify that person as a lock. But I do want to ask that as the next question. Who do you have as the 5th starter? Obviously, Pepio, Grove, Jackson are the 3 names that have been mentioned. Most people talking Pepio, Grove. Dave Roberts mentioned Andre Jackson, who, again, 6 innings, scoreless, 5 hits, 7 strikeouts, 1 walk for Jackson. So he's had a nice spring, albeit not as a starter, as a reliever, back end of games, yada, yada, yada. One of these guys obviously will be on the opening day roster as a number 5 starter. We don't think it will be Gavin Stone. Who do you have as the number 5 starter come opening day?
I think it's Pepio. And again, like
Okay.
I'll kind of add the caveat of I'm assuming like they've been saying the side discomfort he felt in his last start isn't anything to worry about. So assuming that that is true and he is healthy, I think it will end up being Pepio.
Okay. I'm with you. Again, I think those two guys, I think Pepio started, a few steps ahead of Grove just because of the upside. And while I think Grove had sort of made up that ground at one point, Grove struggled in his last start. Pepio has continued to perform well. So I've got Pepio as the number 5 starter as well. So with Pepio, Gratterall, Ferguson, and Miller, that gets us to 11. That means we have 2 spots left on the Dodgers opening day roster as we talk about final bullpen spots. And I think this is where, Matt, it gets to be the most interesting because I've got 6 names on the 40-man roster who I think are in contention. And I would even throw a name or 2 off of the 40-man roster into contention here. I've got, if Pepio is the number 5 starter, Michael Grove and Andre Jackson. Do they keep one of those guys as a number 6 starter / longman? I think it's possible. Then you've got guys that I think we're all sort of surprised are still around. Phil Bickford, Justin Brule, Victor Gonzalez, and Jimmy Nelson. I would throw in, and by the way, I'll go through these real quick. Bickford has had a really good spring. He's a guy that I did not expect to be in contention. He can't be optioned anymore. He's gone 5 2/3, 1 earned, just 2 strikeouts, 2 walks. So that's not great. But again, we're talking about the back of the bullpen and not exactly incredible pickings because of the injuries. It's worth mentioning, by the way, Alex Reyes, Blake Trinan, Daniel Hudson, JP Fireeisen, all injured, not expected to be ready for opening day. Justin Brule, 3 innings, 4 earned, not great for him. Victor Gonzalez, 3 1/3, 5 earned, not good from him. Jimmy Nelson, 11 walks and 21 plate appearances, not good from him. The name off the 40-man roster I would offer to you as an Oregon Duck alum and also a guy that was incredibly nice to us, Jake Reed, 5 2/3, 1 earned run, 2 hits. He's a guy that if you're in the deep corners of Twitter, there was some talk about his trip to Driveline this season, this offseason, and maybe like sort of a new pitch, new development he had. I didn't think he was going to be in contention, but when you look at what Brule has done, what Gonzalez has done, what Jimmy Nelson has done, and the injuries, could be in contention. The last name I'll throw out, a guy who has major league experience, who has not featured prominently this spring, Wander Suero, 6 innings, 1 earned, 6 strikeouts, no walks from him. So a good performance. So again, 2 spots left: Grove, Jackson, Bickford, Brule, Gonzalez, Nelson, Reed, and Suero. Those are kind of the names. Take it wherever you want to from here, Matt.
So I'll go. I think the Pepio's in, and so then I think there is a debate. Is it Grove or Jackson for kind of the swingman bullpen role?
Yeah,
and I think it goes to Andre Jackson just because he had a little more experience doing that up with the Dodgers.
Okay.
And whereas, similar to James Outman, where, they're going to weigh, does it make sense to have him potentially be a platoon player with us or starting every day in OKC? I think that will apply to Michael Grove. We let him go to Oklahoma City. Remember, he joined the Dodgers last season from Tulsa, from AA. And then after he was up with the Dodgers, then he got optioned to OKC. So he hasn't really even had any sort of, seasoning down at the AAA level, which credit to him for still coming up and performing well and for pitching well again this spring.
Yeah.
But I think there's going to be maybe some benefit to him potentially starting on kind of a regular basis with OKC to begin the season. And so, you let Andre Jackson, stash him in the bullpen. And then I think from
so let me pause you right there because I'll build off that. I agree that I think one of those 2 guys makes it, in part because of the lack of real good options in the rest of the group, and also just because it's the beginning of the season. You're probably going to have days where like how built up is fill in the blank. And so I would go, but I'll go Michael Grove because just as I think Pepio started a few steps ahead of Grove, I think Grove started a few steps ahead of Andre Jackson. Grove got multiple appearances last year. Jackson did not. So I'm going to go Grove, and I agree with you. He makes it. So that leaves us 1 spot for Bickford, Brule, Gonzalez, Nelson, Reed, Suero, or fill in the blank.
I think this comes down to Bickford and Brule.
Okay.
I would go Bickford, but I'm not sure if they would maybe want a third lefty in the bullpen. I don't know how much that may be a value to the team. Yeah. And so again, I think it'll be Bickford, but if they went Brule, I would say, okay, they must have wanted a third left-hander and, makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with you. Bickford's been better this spring. He has no options. So I think Bickford's the guy who gets the first call up. You're kind of hoping that he doesn't get used, but you've at least seen it with Bickford a couple of years ago. He had a really nice stretch. Now, was he overperforming everything? Very possible, but we agree there. So I've got Grove, Bickford, Gratterall, Ferguson, Miller, Kershaw, Urias, May, Syndergaard, Almonte, Phillips, Vesia. The only difference in ours is that you've got Andre Jackson and I've got Michael Grove. We both have Pepiot as the fifth starter. So looking at it, you've got Yanni Hernandez and you've got Andre Jackson, and I've got James Outman and I've got Michael Grove. So there's our two differences, Matt. We can evaluate very quickly how we did in this conversation. But there you go. That's who we've got. So the bullpen one will be interesting. I really liked the depth of the bullpen. I like where the depth of the bullpen will be once some of those guys come back healthy, but we might be some weeks or months away in the cases of Hudson, probably more weeks. Guys like Reyes, Treinen, Fireisen, months, if at all. Last segment here before we get to some questions, and we will get to some questions here. Let's wish our good friend Clayton Kershaw a happy birthday. It is his birthday Sunday as we record this, March 19th. Matt, Clayton Kershaw, Dodger legend, one of the greatest pitchers of all time, a surefire Hall of Famer. Give me a favorite moment, a favorite stat, a favorite thing about Clayton Kershaw as we honor him on his birthday.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think obviously there's the clear choice of, the Dodgers winning the World Series in 2020 and Kershaw running out of the bullpen and kind of celebrating. But I'm going to go to a little bit more of a deep cut, if you will.
I love it.
And take people back to 2014. It's late September. Kershaw's starting against the Giants. And I vividly remember this start because I was there. Dodgers have a chance to clinch the NL West. He goes, I think, like 8 innings or 7 innings with 11 strikeouts. On top of that, also makes one of his kind of stops behind his back, like a comebacker, and he kind of stabs at it, makes that play. And the Dodgers were losing 1-0 in like the 5th or 6th inning, and he hit an RBI triple to the gap, stand-up triple, because the Giants, for whatever reason, had their outfielders shaded for him to go the other way.
Love it.
And he got one through the infield, and it rolled all the way to the wall, and he just kept scoring. And that was obviously his MVP year. And so Dodger State, like when he did that, like the stadium was just going crazy and started chanting MVP. And so it was just, I'll always kind of remember, like, and there are several memories obviously to pick from, but that's just one that I enjoy. And a lot of it is because I was there for it.
Love it. Love it. Well, THP throws a stat out here. His 132 pitch complete game against the Giants to win 2-1 always sticks in my mind. Plus he had a 32 start stretch from 15 to 16 where he had 250 innings and a 1.3 ERA. And that's kind of along the lines of where I went. From 2009 to 2018, this stat blows my mind. He lowered his career ERA every single season for that entire stretch. It dipped as low as 2.36. Now, that would be easy if you started with like a 6.50 and then threw up like a 5.9. That's not what Kershaw did. Across that same stretch, at some point during that stretch, he had 7 straight top 5 Cy Young finishes. He had 4 straight ERA titles in all of Major League Baseball. Led the entire league in ERA 4 consecutive seasons, added a 5th title in 2017. He's tied for 3rd all time in guys who have how many ERA titles you've won. Kershaw has 5. He had 10 straight seasons with a sub-3 ERA. That streak was broken in 2019 with a 3.03 ERA. He had a 43.4 wins above replacement stretch from 2011 to 2016. That was 13 wins above replacement higher than Max Scherzer. Across that stretch, he had a 2.06 ERA. That was like 5 or 6 seasons. And oh, by the way, last year, a 2.28 ERA. Unbelievable pitcher, unbelievable person. Clayton Kershaw, freaking legend for the Dodgers. The only guy featured on my wall twice, by the way. He's in the Titletown newspaper and in the Sandy Koufax piece of art right above it. So Kershaw's the best. We've all obviously had some guys come through our time at the Dodgers that were harder to root for than others. Kershaw was not only the best player in baseball for an extended stretch, the best pitcher of a generation, also an incredibly great dude. So shout out to Clayton Kershaw and happy birthday to him. Let's get to some questions here. I know we're right up against the hour mark. Let's try and answer a couple questions. I saw a couple that were up above, Matt, so I'll throw some of these to you. Who do you think starts opening day for the Dodgers? Is it Clayton Kershaw? Is it Julio Urias? Have we done the math on how they've lined things up? It's weird with Julio away at the World Baseball Classic, but Buehler has gotten the nod in years past. Is it back to being Kershaw's? Is it Julio's? Where do you go?
Yeah, this is so tough. I have done the math. Kershaw right now, his 5-day routine lines him up to start the 2nd game of the regular season.
Okay.
Now, there's obviously enough time between now and then for them to make an adjustment. I think that they do. I think they give it to Kershaw for multiple reasons, and not strictly just like, hey, this could be your last year with us. Like he's a very good pitcher, and like we've discussed, I think he's almost hurt. And there are certain players who fall into this category where they were so good for so long that now that they've taken half a step or one step or 3/4 of a step down, just because it's natural, like father time sets in for everybody. Like it's held against them. Like his ERA last year was 2.28, I think you said. Like compare that to the rest of baseball. Like where does it stack up? Like he's still a very good pitcher, and so
not as good as Tony Gonsolin. That is where it stacks up.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be like a ceremonial thing. It would be, I think it still is warranted, and I think they do give it to him, especially with opening day being at home. And I think one thing we should discuss it maybe when it gets a little bit closer. We could do a short video. Opening day is at night this year for the Dodgers, which
great.
Oh, so you like? I'm not
the weekday day game. It's some of us, Matt. Some of us, Matt. It's not as awesome for. The Kershaw one is interesting. Possibility it's his last season. So that's one notch. The angle that came to me is Julio Urias is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Yeah. Do you throw him a little bone here and say, hey, Julio, we really appreciate you. We really love you. You're going to be the next guy in Los Angeles once Kershaw retires. We're going to give you the opening day start 2023. That's a narrative, right? That's a storyline that's out there.
That is, I agree, but I think also what might resonate more with him is if they say, hey, here's a blank check. Just tell us what the number is.
Maybe opening day won't matter 9 months from now when they're talking through a contract. So fair point there. All right, let's get to a couple questions. Let's see. These are good questions. I'm not trying to ignore any of these. Here you go. Mike M asks, how many wins for Kershaw? You're a big wins guy, so there's no better person, Matt, to ask this question to. How many wins for Clayton Kershaw? I was going to try and pull up his stats to give you some. Here we go. Okay, so 2022, he's 12-3. That was in 22 starts, 10-8 in 22 starts the year before that. Back to 2019, 29 starts. He won 16 games. 9, 18,
I already
12.
already have my number.
You've already got your number. Yeah. Okay, you're the wins guy. What do I need to think that you need some prep here?
Last year did help, but I think he exceeds that and gets to 14.
14. All right, that was the guess. Michael said also he thinks 14 wins for Clayton Kershaw. I mean, really, can I ask how many? So he made 22 starts last year. Do you think he goes over that number this year?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I tend to agree.
I think it'll be like 25, maybe 24, but so not by much. Like it's not going to be, the 28 to 32 that you're used to seeing, but I think he does go over 22 and he finishes at 14 wins.
Okay, I'll go 13 just to be different than you. I'll take the under on 14. Dodgers as a team not going to win as many games as they did last year. I think Kershaw makes a few more starts, but I'll take the under there. As well. Oh man, Mike is asking all the wins. Is this your burner, Matt? He wants to know if Julio's going to get to 20 wins.
No, I don't think so. Not this year. That's tough to do, and I think, like you just said, the Dodgers are going to win fewer games just as a team, and so that'll be a factor. And I mean, he could still get up to like 18 and have a very good season.
Okay, Jason wants to know Dodger wins this season over under 94.5. He specifically made it a half. He said so that you couldn't say push.
This is tough.
So they won 111 last year. So 95. The under. I'll say this: 94. The under would be a 17-win regression from last season.
Yeah, this is tough because this is right around where I expect them to be, 94 to 96. I'll go over because when you hear like they're going to win 17 fewer, like that's a lot of games.
It's like a whole month's worth of wins disappearing.
Yeah, like I would hope that they're not that much worse than last year. So I'll go over that.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I mean, like the one thing that we haven't really spent a ton of time talking about is the schedule change. And so they play less divisional games this year. And in some ways it's like less games against the Padres, probably a good thing. Less games against the Rockies, probably a bad thing. So what did you say? Did you say under?
No, I went over.
You went over.
Because I honestly, I could see it at like 95.
Yeah, I think 96, 95, 96 feels right. So I'll take the over there as well. Anna wants to know chances we make a trade for a shortstop like Tim Anderson. Burns or what are the chances we trade for Tim Anderson, Corbin Burns, or a Yankees shortstop at the deadline? So we're projecting out a few months here, but do you think the Dodgers need to make them do you think the Dodgers make a massive move between now and the deadline?
Yes, I think it'll come closer to deadline than like opening day, obviously. And for multiple reasons. I think one, that's just Andrew Friedman's sort of MO. And even though he also has openly said he doesn't like trading at the trade deadline because the price is way up. But I think, I don't think this is going to shock anybody. The Dodgers roster as constructed right now, I don't think is good enough to win a World Series. And so I think they will need to make a pretty substantial move. Now we'll have to see, does Miguel Rojas hit well enough and he's playing good enough defense that you don't need maybe a shortstop and you need to fortify the rotation. So we'll need a little bit of time to see how that sort of unfolds. And then, you hope to address your biggest needs with the biggest addition.
Yeah, I think Rojas is the big one. Can he hit? He was the third worst hitter among qualified hitters in all Major League Baseball last season. Fantastic defensively. Can he hit? I think is going to be a big question. Tim Anderson's the name. Like the White Sox are going to try and compete. There's obviously a lot of teams make the playoffs nowadays, so it's easier. But if the White Sox fall out of it, could the Dodgers try and swoop? I think that's a real possibility. Let's get to a couple more. One, Trinidad asks, two-part question. What month will Gavin Stone and Bobby Miller make their debuts? And who of the two makes their debut first? So let's ask this way. Who do you think makes their first appearance, Stone or Miller?
I think it's Stone.
Yeah. I think just the way that they've handled that this spring, Miller is not even pitching in games yet because I think they're doing a slow build up so that he's ready for the end of the season. And Gavin Stone, you could make an argument he should be on the opening day roster. So I think it's going to be Stone as well. March 30th is opening day. So what month does Gavin Stone make his debut for the Dodgers? Is it April? Is it May? Is it June?
I'll go like middle of May.
Middle of May. Yeah, I think May. I think May feels about right. You know what? Actually, I'm going to say later. I'll take I think it's going to be later because I think Pepio and Grove pitch well. I think those two guys get the first chance, and I think they pitch well enough to where the Dodgers don't feel the need to rush anything with Gavin Stone.
I think it'll be kind of out of necessity because something happened.
Yeah, I mean, look,
and I'll leave it. I don't want to wish injury on anybody, but there's
some guys who are injury prone, and also we don't know what Syndergaard is going to give you either. Derek wants to know if the janitor doesn't bat cleanup, can you still call him the janitor? Yeah, because as long as the bases are full, he can still be cleaning up out there. And shout out to my guy, Last Word Goods. Check it out, lastwordgoods.com. Check it out, Last Word Goods on Twitter. He's got shirts that say the janitor with Will Smith's face on it. So shout out to the janitor.
I think he's going to be I'm pretty sure Dave Roberts just said recently he'll be batting third.
Beautiful. So. Lots of guys on base, Matt. Plenty of opportunities to clean up. Michael asks, can we squeeze the Mets for anyone good because they lost Diaz? He's not asking if the Mets will be sellers, but do the Dodgers have anybody to trade to the Mets? We just talked about the bullpen. I mean, the Dodgers bullpen will be deep at some point. I don't foresee the Dodgers having anybody that they would want to trade for right now, though, right?
I mean, they could probably get the Mets to bite on Evan Phillips, but I don't think if you're the Dodgers, you want to do that.
Yes, somebody mentioned like Gratterall. I mean, like, could the Dodgers, if the Dodgers don't see Gratterall making a jump, could you maybe get something of real value for Gratterall? Who knows? That would be the only one that I can get. So yeah, we'll end it on that. We should have ended on the janitor. No offense to Michael. It was a great question. I should have ended with the janitor. Last Word Goods. Check it out as well. That's Matt Moreno. My name's Jeff Spiegel. 11 days away as we record this live on a Sunday night from opening day. We appreciate all you folks for joining us on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. Thank you for those listening as part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network somewhere. Thank you for listening. Please rate and review. For those watching the day after on YouTube, thank you. Subscribing the notification bell as well. You can find Matt at mmoreno1015 on Twitter. You can find me at Jeff Spiegel on Twitter. You can find DodgerBlue.com at DodgerBlue1958 everywhere you have social media. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your night. We appreciate you joining us. And as always, go Dodgers.